Hi, welcome to Ag Marketing IQ In Depth. We're here today with David Widmar, Managing Partner at AEI. And David always has lots of great tips for us on how we can bring profitability to our farms. But the other thing today is interesting, particularly to me. We're going to talk a little bit about the Stockdale Paradox. Jim Stockdale was a prisoner of war. I am a U.S. Air Force brat, and I grew up in Northwest Florida, where several former prisoners of war retired to. And I have discovered that whether it's Bud Day, Ed Hubbard, Jim Stockdale, they have a lot they can teach us about life, about resilience, and how you make it through the tough times. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you, Pam. Thanks for that story. And we've been telling producers throughout the winter months, we've been reminding them of the Stockdale Paradox. And as you set the stage, Admiral Stockdale spent about 8 years in a POW camp in Vietnam. He was part of the resistance of American troops that were causing trouble. He was supporting the morale of the other American troops in there. So he got even extra torture and treatment, along with John McCain, somebody else, a name that a lot of us will recognize. But he was asked later in his life, after he got out of that situation, what was the difference between the soldiers who really struggled and the soldiers that were able to maintain their hope and their optimism and keep their spirits up. And Stockdale said, "Oh, it's the optimists that struggled. They were the ones who kept anchoring to we'll get out at Christmas or get out at Easter or Thanksgiving. And then the next holiday would come and that wouldn't happen. And eventually that broken heart would set in and that would really weigh heavily on them." And so Stockdale tells us and went on to tell in this interview what became the Stockdale Paradox. And the paradox is you can't confuse optimism, which is something that you can never lose, with the resolve. And that resolve is what you need to really confront the brutal realities of the facts that you're facing and help get you through that. And I think that's where we are in agriculture for a lot of row crop producers especially, is you don't have to look very far to find some optimism around markets improving or a trade agreement or some policy change or a farm bill program or a farm bill ad hoc program. But a lot of us need to not anchor to that optimism. We need to keep that optimism, but we need to anchor to the resolve that there are some tough decisions that have to be made on the farm. We have to get our cost of production in line. We have to revisit some of our obligations, and we got to make sure we right-size that ship. And so that's what we're thinking and challenging producers with, is really think about and size up that resolve that you have in your operation.
Yeah, that's the tough part. And the thing is, once those hard decisions are made, we feel so much lighter. So how can we make some of those decisions? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was agreeing with you. We almost live through the pain of wrestling with that decision. Is often worse than ripping the Band-Aid off, right? We anticipate it to be tough and difficult. And I think that's just human nature. That's not a fault of anyone that's listening or fault of any of us individually. That's just human nature. And so I think we want to encourage producers just to really lean in and say, what do I need to do in my operation in 2026 to make sure I'm positioning myself and I'm not going to get caught flat-footed if these what-ifs don't materialize favorably.
Yeah. So one of the things you guys look at, you've got 10 steps. We're just going to run through a couple of them today. And one of them was quickly returning to profitability. Quickly may be a surprise to some folks, but you guys have some tips to help farmers look at what they can do to get back on a profitable track.
Yeah. In the downturns in the farmer economy, the pace at which we can get back to a break even or a small profit, even if it's small, is really, really critical. And the reason why it's important to do it quickly is because the faster we get back, the less working capital we burn. And working capital is really that balance sheet resiliency. So our balance sheets have some ability to absorb the financial income shock. But if we can slow that shock down, it really helps maintain those assets that we have in our balance sheet. I think what oftentimes happens is we think, next year's crop will be better. We'll have better yields next year. We'll have better prices next year. We'll get better government policy in place next year. And so we put off that hard decision of maybe adjusting cash rents or adjusting our family living expense or having that difficult conversation with the lender to renegotiate those payment terms. That could be really one of those situations where if we can get back to profitability quickly. It helps our balance sheets. It helps our equity. It really helps us in the years ahead.
Absolutely. And how do we manage that cost? So what are the key things for a farmer to look at? What are the things, they say, look at what you can control. So what can they control?
Well, there are two main types of cost categories. There's variable costs and fixed costs. And oftentimes when we say, I want to manage my costs, I'm a low cost producer, we lump those together. And if really great managers peel those apart, because oftentimes those variable costs, that fertilizer, seed, crop protection, we don't have a lot of influence over what those costs are. We can negotiate on prices. We can think about the right application rates to get the right products. That's really critical that we do that. But I like to remind producers, maybe we're thinking about a 3 or 4 or 5% advantage over ourselves last year, maybe relative to our competitors or our peers in our neighborhood. When we do that, we overlook the fixed cost category. And ultimately, that's where producers have the most influence, the most control. That's our machinery overhead expense. That's our land expense, our labor and our family living expense, maybe our debt service obligations as well, when we think about overhead more broadly. And I think if we have an afternoon to spend in our office really leaning into our cost structure, our temptation is to look at variable costs. But I think the real ROI for our time as a manager is to spend that time on fixed costs, benchmarking, measuring, and figuring out a plan to get those pulled under control.
Yeah, those are great areas to take a look at. And those are some areas where you can have some long-term benefit too. It's not just this season, it's the next season. Another area is, and we've been through it as managers in an office, corporate folks, but for farmers, managing that business also means having those tough conversations with lenders, and sometimes they can be a help. Who knew?
Right, exactly. I think that's when we go in to have those conversations with our lenders and we know what our goals are in our operations, when we have embraced that Stockdale Paradox, when we are willing to confront the brutal realities of where our farm financial situation is, where the farm economy is, those lenders can really help us get on a path and a plan. And they can be part of that accountability that we sometimes need to help us get there. They can really help us get to those goals that we need. I think another key idea that I want to share here that's relevant in today's farm economy, more so in the past, is that a lot of producers are getting financing from non-traditional lenders. So maybe it's a point of sale financing or a manufacturing type program. Those can be really valuable. They can be financially and economically attractive with their interest rates. I think you just need to communicate. Make sure everyone knows that you're using these and make sure there's no surprises if things don't work out as you would plan. So we want to avoid those bad surprises, but we also want to make sure our lenders can help us because they're a depth of resource. They work with a lot of producers. They've seen a lot of things. They're going to be able to help you turn your plan and your situation into something that's accomplishable.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is what we need to do is hold on to our optimism, be optimistic, but anchor to a plan of action that can see us through anytime, any year.
That's completely true, Pam. I also want to encourage folks, don't let your teammates, your neighbors, don't let them lose that optimism as well. Make sure that you're helping them unpack the optimism and that resolve, because we got to get through this together. And I hope that everyone can keep that in mind.
That's right. At the end of the day, agricultural strength is our community and the valuable people that we count as part of our community. So thanks for your time today, David. I always enjoy visiting with you. And everybody can sign up for marketing newsletters at farmfutures.com. And we look forward to seeing you out and about at grower meetings this year. Take care.